In a world of crowns and winter, one choice changes everything. What if one marriage rewrote the fate of Westeros? Let's begin today's story. This story is written and narrated by Fantasy Reimagined.
The wagons came at noon. They did not arrive to cheers. Robb Stark stood at the edge of the river road and watched them crest the low hill. One by one, canvas-covered, oxen straining, wheels groaning under weight that was unmistakable even from a distance. Grain, enough that the ground seemed to feel it before the men did. Tyrell colors marked the escort, not many, but enough. Clean armor. Southern horses. Men who had not yet learned how mud pulled at boots or how cold crept upward from wet ground. The Riverlands folk came out slowly. No rush, no gratitude. They stood at a distance, arms folded, children half hidden behind skirts. They had learned not to trust wagons. Robb raised a hand before anyone else could speak. "Unload here," he said. One of the Reach men hesitated. "My lord, the stores?" "Here," Robb repeated. The grain was brought down sack by sack, set in rows. It looked obscene laid out like that. Too much in one place. Too clean. Too orderly. Robb gave his next order quietly. Rations are to be measured, equal allotments. No hoarding. No priority for soldiers over locals. There was a pause, the kind that meant the order would be obeyed but remembered. The northern men were the first to notice the guards. They watched the Tyrell soldiers form a loose perimeter, spears grounded, eyes alert, protecting the grain, southern hands on northern food. One man spat into the dirt. Another laughed once, sharp and humorless. Robb saw it. He said nothing. Later, he walked the line himself, watched sacks opened, scoops measured, hands reaching out. Some trembling, some steady, some too quick. A woman cursed when told to wait. A boy was pulled back by the collar before he could grab more than his share. "Order," Robb said once. It carried barely. By evening, the camp smelled different. Not blood, not smoke, bread. Men ate slower than usual. Some ate quickly, eyes down. Some lingered, chewing as if testing whether the food would vanish if they weren't careful. A pair of northerners argued near the fires. They guard it like it's theirs. It is theirs. Then what are we? Robb did not intervene. He walked past, listening. When night came, he sat alone with the ledgers. Numbers scratched into parchment by candlelight. Counts of mouths, distances, days. An army fed was not the same army he had led south. Fed men waited. They complained. They noticed fairness. They noticed slights. He wrote an order, then crossed it out. Wrote another. Folded the parchment without sealing it. Outside, someone laughed. Someone else shouted. Somewhere, a sack was dropped and burst open, grain spilling into the dirt like something wasted. Robb closed the ledger. He thought of Winterfell. Of cellars and stores measured in silence, of how hunger had always been shared, not guarded. Bread changed men. He wondered what else it changed. When he finally lay down, sleep did not come quickly. The camp breathed around him, fuller than before, heavier. The wagon stood empty now. The grain did not. MARGAEry Tyrell did not announce herself. She wrapped herself in a plain cloak, chose boots already scuffed, and left her hair unadorned. No banners, no escort worth naming. The guards at the edge of the camp glanced at her, then looked away again. She was one more woman moving between fires. The camp smelled of wet leather and boiled grain. No incense, no perfume. Smoke clung to everything. She walked slowly. Women moved through the camp with purpose, carrying water, mending torn mail, binding wounds with hands that did not hesitate. Their dresses were practical, layered, darkened by dirt that would not wash out. No one watched her with curiosity. No one smiled to please her. A girl no older than 12 dragged a sack nearly her size across the mud. When it snagged, she swore and kicked it free. Margaery stepped aside to let her pass. At a fire, two women argued quietly over a pot. Not about men, about measurements. About how much could be spared before the next ration call. "7 save us," one muttered. The other snorted. "The 7 aren't here." Margaery slowed. She passed a small shrine set back from the tents. Stones stacked carefully. A strip of cloth knotted around a branch. No sept, no candles. An older woman noticed her looking. "Old gods," the woman said, not unkindly. "They listen better." Margaery nodded. She did not argue. She had learned when not to speak. Further in, she heard laughter. Rough, brief. It ended quickly. Men rose when an officer passed, then sat again without ceremony. No songs. She realized then how little beauty mattered here. How useless charm was without context. A smile meant nothing if it did not come with hands willing to work. At one fire, a woman was stitching a tear in a banner, wolf sigil dulled by smoke. Her fingers were quick, precise. Margaery watched. The woman glanced up. Need something? No, Margaery said. I was just looking. The woman returned to her work. Margaery stood there longer than necessary. No one asked her name. When she turned back toward the outer tents, the camp looked different, not hostile, closed. Like a door that did not need guarding because no one expected it to open. Back in her quarters, she washed the mud from her hands slowly. It clung beneath her nails. She sat without calling for servants. Thought of the gardens at Highgarden, of color, of softness. This place would not bend for her. She would have to bend first. Outside, the camp settled into its uneasy rhythm. Fires burned low. Somewhere, a wolf howled, not close enough to fear, not far enough to ignore. Margaery did not sleep at once. When she finally lay down, she did not dream of crowns. They met without ceremony. No banners, no music, just a long table dragged into a drafty hall, torches set far enough apart that shadows pooled between them. Outside, the wind worried at the shutters. Winter was not here yet, but it had sent word ahead. Great John Umber took his seat heavily, the bench creaking under him. He did not wait for permission to speak. He never had. I've heard enough, he said, voice carrying easily. Grain wagons. Southern guards. Pretty words about coordination. A few heads turned. No one interrupted him. This isn't about bread, Great John went on. It's about memory. He leaned forward, forearms on the table, scars pale against weathered skin. The North has bent before. We bent for dragons. We bent for lions. Every time we were told it would be different. He snorted. It never was. An older lord cleared his throat. No one's naming names. We don't have to, Great John said. We remember the outcomes. A murmur moved through the hall. Not agreement exactly. Recognition. Southern promises don't rot all at once, Great John continued. They spoil slow. By the time you taste it, it's already too late. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Another lord stared at the table, fingers tracing old nicks in the wood. What happens, Great John said, lowering his voice, when our king doesn't come back? The question landed and stayed. Not if, when. A man near the end of the table spoke without looking up. The boy's strong. So was his father, Great John replied. Silence followed that. What happens? Another voice added, if he falls in the south and winter's already on us. No one answered immediately. Roose Bolton sat with his hands folded, listening. He had chosen a place where the torchlight did not quite reach his face. When he spoke, it was as if he were reading from a ledger only he could see. Stability, he said softly, does not arise on its own. Heads turned. Rosy-eyes did not meet their eyes. If the king is absent, he continued, someone must enforce order. Collect levies, resolve disputes, keep roads passable. Great John grunted. You volunteering? Rosie's mouth curved faintly. I'm observing that where enforcement is clear, disorder is brief. He paused. At the Dreadfort, he added. Order has been maintained efficiently. The word lingered. Efficiently. No one asked how. Rose went on as if noting whether. There are men who achieve results without requiring ceremony. A bastard was not named. He did not need to be. A chair scraped. A lord shifted. Then stilled. Great John watched Rose for a long moment. The North isn't ruled by fear, he said. No, Rose agreed. But it can be preserved by it. That earned a few looks. Not approval. Not rejection. Calculation. Rosieres fell silent again. He watched who leaned forward, who leaned back, who avoided his gaze, who glanced toward the door as if already imagining what might happen if no one was clearly in charge. He noted them all. When the meeting broke, it did so without resolution. Men left in pairs or alone. Conversations began and ended halfway through sentences. Outside, snow had not yet fallen, but the ground was already hardening. Rosie Bolton lingered last, listening to the empty hall settle. Somewhere far away, a wolf howled. He did not smile. He simply counted. Tywin Lannister did not look at the battlefield maps anymore. They still hung on the walls of the solar-inked rivers, pinned roads, little carved men frozen mid-march, but he passed them without stopping. Battles had a way of resolving themselves. Coin did not. He stood instead at the long table where ledgers were spread open, their pages weighted down with small stones. The room smelled faintly of parchment and iron. Outside, the city muttered to itself, a low, constant sound that never quite reached order. "Begin with the ports," Tywin said. The man across from him, one of Cavan's quieter clerks, dipped his head and made a mark. "Which ones, my lord?" "The ones the Tyrells do not own outright," Tywin replied. Yet, a pause. "That will anger Highgarden." Tywin's gaze lifted at that, slow and precise. "Highgarden is already angry." He moved his finger down a column of numbers. Imports, tolls, outstanding debts. The Reach fed half the realm, but feeding bred dependency, and dependency bred resentment. Tywin understood resentment. It was a resource like any other. "Seize the river barges at Bitterbridge," he continued. "Not publicly. Quiet inspections. Fees. Delays. And the merchants?" "Offer protection," Tywin said. "At a price." The clerk hesitated. "Some are Tyrell bannermen. Some are tired of being so," Tywin replied. He turned then, finally glancing at the maps. Not the armies, but the roads between them. Trade routes bled more slowly than soldiers, but they bled all the same. Another man entered, this one bearing letters sealed in lesser wax, not roses, bees, plows. A handful of minor sigils that rarely mattered, until they did. "Responses," the man said. Tywin broke the seals methodically. "Read, set aside. Read again." "They fear the Starks," the man offered carefully. "And the Tyrells." "Of course they do," Tywin said. "The Starks take grain. The Tyrells decide who eats." He folded a letter and tapped it once against the table. "Remind them that the Reach does not rule by law, but by abundance," the man said. "Which can be interrupted," Tywin replied. He dictated without raising his voice. Loans extended. Debts called in. Old contracts reinterpreted. A quiet reminder that gold traveled better than bread when winter hardened roads. By nightfall, ravens had flown east and south, carrying words that did not threaten but suggested, the kind of words that lingered. In King's Landing, a merchant's warehouse was sealed for inspection. In Old Town, a shipment sat on the docks one day too long. In a market town under Tyrell colors, prices crept upward without explanation. Gold moved, grain stalled. Tywin stood alone at the table when the room finally cleared. He closed one ledger and opened another, thinner, newer. At the top of the page, a single line had been written. Stark to Rall, alignment. He drew a line beneath it, not to cross it out, to measure. "They will learn," he said to the empty room, "that feeding the realm makes enemies faster than starving it." Outside, the bells rang again, not in alarm, not in celebration, just marking time. Tywin Lannister returned to his numbers. The war was no longer fought where men could see it, and that suited him fine. The bells rang before dawn. Not the measured toll for prayer, but the quicker cadence used to gather. The sound carried through alleys, where the sun rarely reached, through doorways where people slept in shifts, through the half-ruined markets, where yesterday's prices still clung to the boards. The High Septon stood behind the pulpit and waited for silence. He did not raise his hands. He did not shout. The crowd settled because it had learned. "We have been patient," he said. The word moved through them. "We have prayed, while kings quarreled. We have fasted while nobles feasted. We have trusted while promises were broken." A murmur, low, familiar. "The gods see all," the High Septon continued, "and they see betrayal." He spoke of the North without naming it at first, of old trees and silent gods, of oaths sworn to wood and shadow rather than light. "Heresy does not always announce itself," he said. "Sometimes it comes wrapped in grain." The crowd shifted. "Food used to bind the realm together," he went on. "Now it is hoarded, traded, withheld, decided by those who believe abundance makes them righteous." He paused, letting the words settle unevenly. "Not all betrayals come from the cold." By the time he named Margaery Tyrell, the crowd was ready. "She has turned the bounty of the Seven into leverage," he said. "She has fed war and called it mercy." A woman near the front crossed herself. A man spat. Outside, the sept of bread was being handed out, smaller loaves than before, still warm, still enough to keep people standing where they were told. In the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister listened to the bells and smiled thinly. "They're learning," she said. The High Septon sat across from her now, hands folded into his robes, eyes lowered. He did not look at her when he spoke. "They are hungry," he said. "Hunger sharpens faith, and faith sharpens obedience." Cersei replied, She poured wine and did not offer him any. "You will continue," she said. "The sermons, the warnings, the distinctions. The faith does not take orders," the High Septon said mildly. Cersei did not contradict him. "Of course not," she said. "You act according to conscience." She leaned closer. "And your conscience is troubled by a southern queen who feeds men into war while calling herself merciful." The High Septon's lips pressed together. "The gods do not approve of divided loyalties. Neither do kings," Cersei said. He rose when dismissed, his departure unhurried. Cersei watched him go, already considering what would happen if he stopped being useful. In Flea Bottom, a man knelt in the mud while a Septon pressed bread into his hands and whispered prayers over him. The man bowed his head and stayed kneeling after the bread was gone. Across the city, small shrines multiplied. Candles burned in windows where banners once hung. The seven-pointed star appeared scratched in the doors. Lannister colors were noticed less. By afternoon, a rumor spread that northern gods had cursed the grain. By evening, someone had been beaten for saying otherwise. Cersei stood at a balcony as the city darkened, the bells finally silent. Fires burned where they were allowed to. Prayers drifted upward, tangled and fervent. "Let them believe," she said to no one. Below, the crowd shifted again, restless but held. The faith had chosen its side, and no one king or queen seemed entirely sure how to move it back. Scene shifts to Winterfell. Winterfell did not rise the way Pike did. It did not claw at the sky or defy the sea. It sat, broad, old, patient. Stone warmed by generations of fires, not sharpened by storms. When Theon Greyjoy first saw its walls from the ridge, he felt a familiar irritation tighten behind his ribs. Too solid, too certain. He raised his hand, and the Ironborn halted behind him, their mail rattling softly, their axes already loose in their grips. They looked past him toward the castle, with expressions that held neither awe nor hatred, just appetite. "It's thin," one of them muttered, "like everything they build." Dan did not answer. He knew the garrison numbers. He had walked these walls as a boy. He knew which towers slept and which paths the guards favored, out of habit rather than sense. That knowledge felt like a weapon now. "Fast," he said. "Clean." The gates did not hold long. They never did when surprise came with teeth. A handful of men died shouting. A few more ran. Yang crossed the threshold with his sword bare, and felt something twist as the sound of the castle changed around him. Too many echoes. Too much space. Ironborn boots rang where northern ones had always been quieter. "Take the armory," someone called. "Fire to the stables," another shouted. "No," Theon said sharply. "No fires, no rape, no slaughter." Laughter followed him down the courtyard. They mocked without stopping. Winterfell fell the way old things sometimes do, suddenly after years of appearing unbreakable. Doors splintered. Smoke rose anyway, carried by carelessness rather than command. Someone overturned the torch. Someone else did not bother to stamp it out. In the confusion, Bran Stark was being carried. Hodor moved as fast as his legs allowed, breath coming in great, uneven pulls. Ozya was ahead of him, knife already in hand, eyes fixed on paths that did not exist on any map. "Not the gates," she hissed. "Not the gates." The air felt wrong. Bran could not name how. The horses screamed in the stables, wild and sudden. Ravens burst from the rookery in a black cloud, scattering in no clear direction. Summer growled, not at men, at the woods. "Stop," Bran said. They did not. Rickon was crying now, fists knotted in Hodor's tunic, his voice thin and sharp with panic. Osha swore under her breath and dragged them through a servant's passage that smelled of damp and old ash. Behind them, Winterfell burned in places it never had before. Vianne reached the great hall and stopped. It looked smaller than he remembered. He took the seat he had seen Robb take. It did not fit him the same way. He shifted once. Then again, the hall watched him back in silence. "They ran," one of the Ironborn said later. "The wolf pups." Another shook his head. "No. Caught in the fire. Upper tower." Yen stood slowly. "Which is it?" The men shrugged. Someone laughed. "You want to look?" one asked. Before the can could answer, a man stepped forward from the edge of the hall. Plain leathers. Northern cut. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Fear spreads faster when it's certain," the man said. "Dead boys do more than living ones." The Theon stared at him. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows the North," the man replied. "Someone who knows what keeps it quiet." The Aensern turned away. Later he stood in the yard and watched smoke rise where smoke had never risen before. The walls loomed. The godswood was still, too still. They fled, someone said again. They burned, another insisted. The man in plain leathers said nothing. He did not need to. Darren chose. He chose the version that did not leave him searching the woods at night. The version that did not require admitting he had lost what he had come to take. By morning, Winterfell was ironborn. By nightfall, it was something else. In the Wolf's Wood, the trees closed behind Asha and the boys. Paths bent away from where they should have led. Summer kept close. Hackles raised. Rain did not look back. Stone had fallen. Salt claimed it, and nothing felt whole anymore. Scene shifts back to Robb's camp. The Raven arrived at dusk. Robb Stark broke the seal without ceremony. The parchment resisted slightly, as if reluctant to be read. He unfolded it once, then again, eyes moving quickly at first, then slowing. Catelyn watched him from across the tent. She had learned the signs, the stillness that came before sound. No, she said. Robb did not answer. He handed her the letter. Winterfell had fallen. The words were plain, almost careful. Theoren Greyjoy had taken the castle. Fires had spread. The boys were gone. Burned, it was said. The letter chose certainty. Rickon. Bran. Catelyn read to the end and kept reading after there was nothing left. Her hands did not shake. She sat down slowly, as if the ground had risen to meet her. Outside, the camp continued its evening rhythms. Pots clanged. Horses stamped. Orders were called and answered. Robb turned away from the table. He did not pace. He stood with his hands braced against the tent pole until the canvas creaked. I sent him, he said. Catelyn did not respond. He ate at our table, Robb continued. He swore. Catelyn folded the letter carefully. Once. Twice. She set it down. They were children, she said. That was all. Later, the lords were summoned. The news spread faster than Robb's voice could carry it. Some men spoke at once. Others not at all. Winterfell burned. The North's heart, taken without a battle. A few voices, not loud enough to challenge but loud enough to be heard, asked the question that would not leave the air. If he could not protect his home, Great John ended that line of thought with a look and a word sharp enough to cut it short. Others followed. Loyalty held, barely. Roose Bolton spoke last. The loss is grave, he said, but not final. Robb looked at him. Winterfell can be retaken, Roose continued. Stability restored. The Ironborn are raiders, not rulers. And the boys? Someone asked. Roose inclined his head slightly. The North has endured losses before. Robb dismissed them soon after. He did not ride north. Not yet. The wagons from the Reach were still moving. The contracts still held. Roads had to be kept open. Grain guarded. The war did not pause for grief. He chose men instead, quiet ones, those who knew the Wolf's Wood, those who did not speak much and did not ask questions. Take the castle, he told them, what's left of it. Hold it, rebuild what you can. And Theon? One asked. Robb did not answer. When they were gone, the tent felt too large. Robb and Catelyn mourned for whole time they can get. Catelyn sat alone for a long time after that. When she rose, it was only to move the Stark banner closer to the fire. Far to the south, Olenna Tyrell dipped her quill and drew a clean line across a fresh sheet of parchment. She did not write names yet. She wrote conditions. Succession, clearly stated. Northern law recognized. No interference from sept or crown. Armies commanded separately. Faith tolerated, not imposed. She paused, adjusted a phrase, crossed out a word too soft. Marriage was not romance. It was structure. She leaned back and considered the window. The fading light, somewhere north of reason and comfort. Her granddaughter would have to live among people who did not sing for pleasure. Would Margaery endure it? Olenna set the thought aside. Endurance could be taught. Outside, the day gave way to night. The parchment remained unsigned. The shadow beyond the wall. The ranging found no bodies at first. Only tracks. Jon Snow crouched beside them, glove pressed into the snow, following the line where boots had bitten too deeply to belong to wildlings. The prints were wrong, too even, too deliberate. They did not wander. They did not hesitate. South, one of the rangers said. Jon nodded. He did not look up. The trees stood bare and close together here, branches creaking faintly as wind moved through them. No birds, no small sounds. The woods felt held, as if waiting. They rode on. By dusk they found the camp, or what had been a camp, fire pit cold. Supplies stacked neatly, untouched by scavengers. A broken spear leaned against a tree. Its shaft snapped cleanly, not splintered. No blood, someone muttered. Jon did not answer. They found the armor farther on, blackened by frost, laid out as if placed rather than dropped. The cloak was folded, the sword beside it clean. Desertion? A ranger offered. Jon picked up the sword. It felt heavier than it should have. No, he said. They turned back before full dark. The horses were restless, breath steaming. One refused to step forward until kicked hard enough to draw a curse. That night, the fire burned higher than usual. The men spoke quietly. Old stories surfaced without being invited. Few laughed too quickly. Jon listened and said nothing. When the watch changed, he walked the perimeter alone. The wall loomed behind him, vast and pale, its surface catching starlight unevenly. South of it, kingdoms argued. North of it, something moved without banners. He thought of writing. The words came easily enough at first. We found signs. He scratched them out. Men missing. That too. What did he say that would not sound like fear? The Night's Watch had fewer men than the wall had towers. Ravens went unanswered. Supplies came late, or not at all. Kings did not look this far north, unless they were sent. Jon folded the parchment. Robb had a crown now. Wars. Grain. Alliances written in ink and blood. Jon imagined the letter arriving amid councils and arguments. Another problem. Another voice asking for attention. He set the parchment aside. Before dawn, a horn sounded from the far watch. One blast. Then silence. By morning, the snow had covered the tracks again. The woods gave nothing back. Jon stood on the wall as the sun rose thin and weak, lighting the world just enough to show how empty it was. The War for Thrones felt very far away. It did not matter. Something was coming, and the wall was not ready. Scene shifts to King's Landing, Red Keep. The news reached Sansa Stark in fragments. A whisper between guards. A servant who forgot to school her face. A word spoken too loudly and then swallowed whole. Winterfell. Burned. The boys. No, not boys. Her brothers. Gone. No one told her directly. She learned the way prisoners learn most things, by listening when she was not meant to. By reading pauses as carefully as words. She was sitting by the window when it settled into certainty. The light was wrong that morning, thin and colorless, as if the city itself had decided not to look too closely at what it carried. Sansa folded her hands in her lap and waited for something inside her to break. It did not. Later a maid came with fresh dresses, southern cuts, reach silks, green threaded with gold. From the queen, the girl said. Sansa touched the fabric once. It was soft. Too soft. So the Tyrells had chosen. She was taken to Cersei that afternoon. The queen sat rigidly, wine untouched, her mouth tight with something like satisfaction. You see, Cersei said, all things rot eventually, even wolves. Sansa inclined her head. She had learned when not to speak. They're aligning with your brother now, Cersei continued, circling her like something assessing a wound. The roses think grain makes kings. Sansa said nothing. Cersei stopped in front of her. And what does that make you, little dove? Sansa looked up. She did not answer at once. Something had shifted. Quietly. Permanently. I am still here, she said. Cersei laughed. It was sharp and brief. For now. The cruelty became smaller after that. More precise. Meals delayed. Privileges offered. Then withdrawn. Promises dangled like hooks. Sansa accepted everything with the same calm courtesy. She thanked guards who insulted her, smiled at women who flinched when she passed. She learned which silences were safer than words. At night she lay awake and practiced breathing slowly, evenly, as if her body were a room she could leave without being noticed. Queens, she was learning, were not made by crowns. They were made by watching, by remembering who spoke when they thought no one listened, by noticing how fear moved through a room faster than truth, by understanding that mercy was not the same as weakness, but neither was it free. One evening, she stood at the balcony and looked out over King's Landing. Fires burned in places she did not remember from before. Candles glowed where banners once hung. She imagined Winterfell as it had been. Stone halls, cold air, the sound of her brother's feet running ahead of her. She did not imagine their faces. That she saved for later. When she turned back inside, her expression did not change. Somewhere beyond the walls, wars were being decided, contracts written, bread counted, thrones weighed against survival. Sansa Stark stood in the Red Keep and learned how to endure without showing it. She was still alive. That would have to be enough. Scene shifts to Robb's camp. They met without witnesses, not because secrecy was romantic, but because this was not a thing meant for audiences. The tent had been cleared of maps and guards alike. A single lantern burned low between them, its light uneven, refusing to settle. Robb Stark stood when Margaery Tyrell entered, habit. He did not offer his hand. She did not expect it. Outside, the camp breathed, horses shifted. Men spoke and stopped speaking. The war did not pause for this. They did. Robb broke the silence first, though not with what he had planned. "I'm afraid of what I'm becoming," he said. It was not said loudly. It did not need to be. Margaery did not answer at once. She moved closer to the table, rested her hands on its edge, the lantern light catching the plainness of her sleeves. "Say more," she said. Robb looked past her, at the tent wall, as if it might argue back. "Every decision takes something. Every order leaves something behind. I don't feel it when I give them anymore. That frightens me." Margaery nodded once. No comfort, no correction. "I was raised to be liked," she said. "Loved, if possible. Admired at the very least." Robb glanced at her then. "In the north," she continued. "None of that matters. They won't love me. They may not even forgive me for coming." "You don't need them to," Robb said. "I do," she replied. "Or I become something else. Something ornamental or worse." She stepped back, just enough to reclaim distance. "I don't fear ruling," she said. "I fear being endured." The lantern flickered. Robb considered her words as he would terrain, not for advantage, for footing. "This won't save us," he said. "No," Margaery agreed. "It won't end the war." "No. It will bind us to consequences we can't walk away from." Yes, that was as close as they came to certainty. Robb rested his hands on the table where maps had once been. "If we do this," he said, "it won't be for banners or songs. It will be for winters," Margaery said. "For bread," Robb added. "For restraint," she said. They stood there, close enough now that neither could pretend distance was necessary. No touch followed. No promise spoken aloud. "Marriage isn't victory," Robb said. Margaery met his eyes. "It's responsibility." Outside, someone laughed. Somewhere else, a hammer struck wood. Something was being built. Something else, undone. Robb straightened. "Then we do it, knowing what it costs." Margaery inclined her head, knowing it won't love us back. The lantern burned lower. When they parted, nothing visible had changed. No kiss, no vow. But the war would not go back to how it had been, and neither would they. They gathered at dusk. No feast was called. No banners raised. Just the lords, the captains, the men who had ridden south, believing the war would end cleanly if fought hard enough. Torches burned low. The wind worried at cloaks and carried the smell of wet earth. Robb Stark stood before them without armor. He waited until the murmuring settled. It took longer than it used to. "I will speak plainly," he said. That, at least, still held. "The Reach has offered terms," he continued. "Not charity, alignment. Grain in winter, roads held open, coordination, not command. A few nods, a few narrowed eyes. I intend to pursue formal betrothal talks with House Tyrell." The words fell and did not echo. No cheers followed, no shouts, no objections either, just silence, spreading outward like cold. Robb let it stand. "This is not desire," he said. "It is survival." Someone shifted. Leather creaked. "The North cannot eat honor," Robb went on. "It cannot fight winter alone. This binds us to consequences. But it keeps us standing long enough to face them." Still nothing. He searched faces he had known since boyhood. Men who had lifted him onto shields. Men who had called him king with tears in their eyes. They listened now as they would to weather, attentive, distant, already adjusting. A lord near the back cleared his throat. "And if the Reach decides otherwise, then we will endure as we always have," Robb said. "But we will not refuse help because it offends memory." The silence held. He nodded once as if to seal it, and stepped back. The meeting broke without argument. Without affirmation, men drifted away in small knots. Conversations began quietly, then stopped when he passed. Someone clasped his shoulder out of habit, then let go too quickly. Robb remained where he was until the torches burned down. When he finally turned away, the camp seemed larger, less familiar. The words had been said, scene shifts to northern ladies. They did not meet in a hall. There was no table dragged into place. No summons sent, no voices raised to be heard over others. The North did not always decide things that way. Meverjang. Mormont sat on a stone bench near the edge of the camp, her cloak pulled tight against the wind. The ground here was hard, already edging toward frost. Lyanna stood nearby, boots planted wide, watching the men spar a short distance off. They hit each other with blunted steel and did not bother to shout. "A southern queen," Lyanna said at last. Maeshe grunted. She did not look up. "Not yet. They're talking like it's decided," Lyanna went on. "Like words spoken once turn into law." "They do," Maegij said. "Sometimes," Lyanna frowned. "I don't care where she was born." Maegij glanced at her then. "You will." Lyanna held her gaze. "I care what she does." Maegij's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "That's the right answer." They sat in silence for a while. Camp life moved around them without ceremony. A woman passed carrying water, paused to adjust the weight, then went on. Two girls argued quietly over a needle. Somewhere, a wolf barked once and went quiet again. "She won't know our ways," Lyanna said. "No," Mage replied. "And neither did your grandsire's wife." "She learned." "She listened," Mate said. That counted. Lyanna kicked at the dirt. "They say she brings grain." "They say many things," Mage answered. "Grain runs out, winter doesn't." Lyanna nodded slowly. "If she expects songs, she'll be disappointed." Mage snorted. "If she expects love, she's a fool." That hung between them, not unkindly. Lyanna looked back toward the sparring men. If she stands when it's cold, if she doesn't flinch when someone speaks against her, if she works... Maggie's followed her gaze. Then she'll last longer than most. And if she doesn't, then the North will remember her briefly, Max said. Another pause. Lyanna turned back. "Blood doesn't make you strong." "No," Meiji agreed. "But it tells you where you start." They rose together when the light began to fail. No decisions spoken aloud, none needed. Across the camp, other women were having similar conversations, not together, not organized. Quiet judgments made while mending, while cooking, while watching the way strangers carried themselves. No banners shifted, no vows were offered, but something settled. The North would watch, and then it would decide. They would not be taken back. Scene shifts to the Reach. Randyll Tarly read the letter twice before burning it. He did not like words that softened themselves. He preferred orders. Clear lines, enemies named and met in the field. The parchment from Highgarden had been careful, almost apologetic, and that alone was enough to offend him. "Snow Kings," he said aloud to an empty solar. He stood with his back straight, armor close at hand. Though there was no battle here, outside, Hornhill moved as it always had. Drills in the yard, spears striking shields in steady rhythm, men who knew what was expected of them. "This is not our war," he told the assembled captains later. They sat in a half-circle, listening without interruption. "The Reach bleeds so others may posture." No one spoke. They rarely did. "We are being asked to feed rebels," Tarly continued. "To guard roads so a northern boy can call himself king while our own lands are stripped of men." One of the captains shifted. Highgarden believes in leverage," Tarly cut in, "and has mistaken grain for strategy." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "The North is cold," he said, "and it will remain cold. No marriage changes that. No wolf learns to rule fields he cannot see." Later, he rode out to visit lesser houses, not openly, not with banners, just enough presence to remind them who had marched beside them before, who had held lines when others wavered. He spoke of duty, of Reach blood spilled far from home, of Olenna Tyrell's appetite for risk. "She gambles with your sons," he said to one lord, and calls it foresight. "And her granddaughter," the man asked. Tarly paused. "A girl shaped by others' ambitions," the words spread, quietly, respectfully. Men nodded and said little. They had granaries to consider, fields already strained by diverted shipments, taxes rising without explanation. At night, Tally returned to Hornhill and reviewed his musters, counted, adjusted, made notes he did not yet send. Highgarden still ruled the Reach, for now, but unity, he knew, was a thing that thinned long before it broke. He set the last letter aside, unburned. Winter would decide who had been reckless, and who had prepared. Scene shifts to Robb's camp. They met with parchment between them. No banners, no witnesses beyond a single scribe whose ink-stained fingers moved only when told. The table was bare, except for documents weighted with small stones, corners curling where they had been handled too often. Catelyn Stark read first. She did not hurry. She traced lines with her finger, paused at clauses, reread what was already clear. When she looked up, Olenna Tyrell was watching her without pretense. Northern succession is not decorative, Catelyn said. It is not flexible. Olenna inclined her head. Neither is southern ambition. They allowed that to stand. The firstborn inherits, Catelyn continued. Regardless of sex, regardless of location, Winterfell remains the seat. No regency imposed from the south, Olenna said. No council answerable to Highgarden. Agreed, Catelyn replied, and no faith authority over northern lands. Olenna's mouth tightened slightly. Tolerance must run both ways. Worship may exist, Catelyn said, but it does not rule. The scribe hesitated. Olenna gestured once, sharply, and the words were written. They moved on. If Robb died, if he lived, if the child was born in winter, if the child was born in war, pages filled with contingencies no one wanted to name aloud. Margaery retains authority over her household, Olenna said. Her lands, her income, her attendance. She will not be isolated, Catelyn agreed. But she will not command northern levies, nor will she be commanded by your gods, Olenna replied. A pause. The children, Catelyn said. They will be raised in the north. They will know the seven, Olenna countered. They will know them, Catelyn allowed. They will not kneel. Ink scratched. A line drawn. Another added beneath it. Neither woman softened. They spoke of winters and widows, of heirs born sickly, of what happened if the reach fractured, of what happened if the north did. When it was done, the parchment lay heavy with meaning. Olenna set her quill aside. This will not make them happy. Catelyn folded the top page. It will keep them alive. They rose together, no embrace, no smile. Outside, the camp went on. The treaty waited. So did the marriage. King's Landing. Reyes did not write the letters himself. He never did. He stood in a narrow chamber where the walls absorbed sound and watched as other hands worked. Ink mixed. Paper chosen carefully. Nothing too fine, nothing too coarse. Seals pressed and lifted. Pressed again. Never twice the same. Too formal, he murmured once. The scribe adjusted. A line softened. A hesitation added where a confident man would never hesitate. A rumor needed room to breathe. By nightfall, the letters were ready. Dozens of them, each saying something slightly different. Each saying enough. One suggested Robb Stark's crown rested on convenience, not consent. Another wondered aloud whether northern lords had been asked at all. A third mentioned a bastard unnamed, conveniently unprovable, raised somewhere between snow and silence. None accused directly. Accusations hardened too fast. Third asked questions. The next bundle concerned the Tyrell girl, Margaery. All smiles and grain. The letters spoke of seduction without describing it, of soft words spoken too close to a young king's ear, of food that came with expectations no one had agreed to. She wants Winterfell without taking it. One letter said. Another wondered whether Reach poison tasted sweeter than southern wine. Varys watched the ink dry. Careful, he said gently, as one scribe added a flourish too distinctive. Hands remember themselves. The flourish vanished. The ravens left in staggered flights. Different directions. Different timings. Some letters traveled by hand, passed along roads where they might be overheard. A few were left unsealed on purpose. By morning, none could be traced back to the same origin. That was the point. In the north, a minor lord received a letter he did not believe and could not quite dismiss. He folded it, then unfolded it again later, alone. In the Riverlands, a captain laughed at a rumor and repeated it an hour later with different words. In the Reach, a merchant wondered whether his delays were punishment or warning. He said nothing. He adjusted his prices. Varys listened as reports filtered back, not answers, but changes. A tone shifted. A glance held too long. A conversation that ended early. Trust did not break. It thinned. He stood later by a window in the Red Keep, looking out at a city that no longer pretended unity. Candles burned in clusters. Bells rang when no one asked them to. Armies moved because they were told. Rumors moved because they were wanted. One knife, Varys said softly, to no one in particular, is enough if you place it early. Below, a man argued with a woman over the price of bread. Nearby, someone crossed themselves at the mention of a name they did not know why they feared. No banners fell, no blood was spilled, but something had been cut, and it would not heal cleanly. Asha Greyjoy took the coast without shouting. That was the first difference. The longships came in before dawn, oars wrapped, hulls cutting water cleanly. The villages woke to boots on stone and spears grounded where doors used to be. No horns, no fires. The Ironborn moved like men who intended to stay. Mark the stores, Asha said. Not the houses, her captains hesitated. One smiled like he expected permission to do something worse. We're not here to sing, she added. We're here to eat. They took grain first, salt next, nets, boats. Anything that fed movement inland. No killing unless resisted. No burning at all. For a day it worked. The villagers watched from doorways, silent, calculating. The Ironborn posted guards and counted sacks. The sea stayed calm. Balon's way would have been louder. He would have wanted smoke visible from the horizon. Asha wanted roads that went nowhere and mouths that waited. By the third day, guides began to arrive. Northmen with careful eyes and 2 eager voices. They offered paths inland, claimed knowledge of supply routes, promised easy targets, further from the shore. Trust them? One captain asked. Asha looked at the man speaking. Test them. The first patrol did not return. No bodies, no fight marks, just absence. The second patrol found a village already burned. Ash still warm. No Ironborn dead. No Ironborn present. The people left behind would not speak. They're burning after we leave, a deckhand said. Who? Someone asked. No answer came. By the end of the week, patterns formed. Ironborn took a village, held it quietly, left behind guards and claims. 2 nights later, smoke rose from the tree line beyond, always inland. Always out of reach, always after. Survivors began telling the same stories without agreeing on details. Wolves, they said. Not packs. 1. Sometimes 2. Attacking without warning. Not feeding. Not lingering. A child screaming somewhere in the woods. High feral. Not asking for help. Fires starting where no torch had touched. Barns igniting after rain. Houses burning from the inside out. Asha listened. She did not interrupt. Before one such attack, a scout reported ravens gathering on bare branches, watching. Too many of them. Before another, a man swore he felt eyes on his back the entire march. Turned and found nothing. The land itself seemed unsettled. This isn't resistance, Asha said that night, staring at the map. Pins marked villages held. Blackened smudges marked those lost. Her captains waited. There's no demand, she continued. No ransom, no banners. Someone offered, Wildings? She shook her head. Too precise. Another voice, quieter. Northmen. Not like this, Asha said. She rode inland herself on the 4th night, left the ships behind. Took only a handful of men who knew how to listen. They found signs, traps too cruel for villagers, bodies displayed, not taken. Marks cut into trees, careless, taunting. Human work. But elsewhere, deeper in the woods, she found different signs. Claw marks, tracks that doubled back on themselves. A small footprint alongside a larger one, bare, pressed deep into the mud. This one doesn't think like a man, she said. They heard the howl then. Close, too close. The men tightened formation. The sound came again, answered farther off. They withdrew before dawn. Back at the coast, another report waited. A northern collaborator had been found. Not killed. Left alive. Tongue gone. Asha read the details twice. 2 forces, she realized. Not allied, not coordinated, just overlapping. One knew fear, used it, sharpened it. The other did not care if fear worked. And somewhere between them, unseen, something watched. She ordered the occupation tightened, fewer patrols inland, more guards, less reach. The coast was no longer quiet. It was listening back. When she stood on the shore at sunset, the sea looked unchanged. Salt and stone, familiar, reliable. Behind her, the land did not settle. It waited. King's Landing. The man who would be called the High Sparrow did not raise his voice. He stood on a broken step near the river, robes plain, feet bare despite the cold, and waited for the crowd to finish gathering itself. They came because there was bread here, because there was listening, because someone had said the 7 were paying attention again. When the noise thinned, he spoke. Food has been turned into favor, he said. People leaned in. No guards pushed them back. No banners marked the space. A woman who calls herself queen feeds war, he went on. She trades loaves for loyalty and calls it mercy. A murmur moved through the crowd. She has chosen kings over gods. Someone shouted a name. Another spat. A third crossed themselves. She wears green and gold, the sparrow said, but she has abandoned the seven. The word abandoned settled heavily. It was one the crowd understood. He did not mention Margaery Tyrell at first. He did not need to. The story had already learned her shape. She feeds the north, he continued, while the faithful starve. A woman near the front raised her loaf. It was smaller than yesterday's. Is that justice? The sparrow asked. No, the crowd answered, uneven but loud. Is that righteousness? No. When he finally spoke her name, it was almost gentle. Margaery Tyrell. The sound changed. Men shouted. Women cried out. Someone pushed forward and was pushed back harder. A rock struck stone. Another followed. She has chosen her throne, the sparrow said. Let the gods choose theirs. By midday the sermons had spread. Not just near the river, in alleys, at corners where bread was handed out with prayers attached. The words shifted as they traveled, sharpening. False queen, southern betrayer. Grain hoarder, the poor listened. They stayed. They brought others. By evening, the seven-pointed star appeared in places it had not before. Scratched into doors, painted onto boards, sewn crudely onto cloaks. Men began to walk together, not toward the Red Keep, but past it. Kings noticed too late. In the Red Keep, a messenger stammered through reports, crowds refusing to disperse, guards lowering spears rather than raising them, septons refusing royal summons. Cersei listened and said nothing. Somewhere else, a man was dragged from a stall and beaten for saying the Tyrell girl had fed his children. No one intervened. Someone prayed aloud as it happened. By nightfall, fires burned again. Not riots this time. Vigils, hundreds of them, faces lit from below, eyes bright with certainty. The sparrows stood at the edge of one such gathering and watched as people knelt where no one had told them to kneel. He said nothing more. He did not have to. By morning, Margaery Tyrell was no longer only a woman in silk far from the city. She was a warning, and the faith had found its enemy.
Thank you for listening to the story. If you enjoyed this reimagined story and audiobook style presentation, feel free to like and subscribe for more content like this. New stories and alternate scenarios are updated regularly. Now see you in the next video.